Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today we've got Luminade's visionary and operator, Tessa Morris, joining us to discuss Kratom, both as a botanical and as an industry. I am so excited to dive right in, so we're just going to do exactly that. Thank you so much for being here today, Tessa.
Thank you for having me.
Yay! Well, first off, what is Luminade? Give us the pitch. What's
Okay.
so great about this drink?
Well, I think it's the best on the market, and I think you agree too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Lumenade is a botanical beverage company. We're brand new to market. We've been out for about 6 weeks now. Our first launch was a kratom beverage, but we're much different than the competition. So we infuse our kratom beverages with electrolytes, and we use all natural ingredients. So absolutely no artificial junk, and we sweeten with all natural sweeteners. So that's a little bit about how we're different. We also use elevated flavor profiles. So right now we have the Luminade lemonade and we have the strawberry mint lemonade with more to come soon.
Mhm. And they're
Elevator
so
pitch.
good, you guys. Oh my gosh. I had the honor, really, of being able to host a bunch of mixologists last week, and we got to play with a bunch of different beverages, Luminade included. Luminade was by far everybody's like favorite thing to not only play with and pose with because it's a super cute can, but honestly, it makes people feel really good. So I would love to hear from you, Tessa. What makes your ingredients so great, and why does that make a difference when it comes to consuming like a Kratom seltzer?
So I got into this industry 3 years ago just as a consumer and I loved it, but there was so much that I felt like could be improved on. The ingredients were the number one thing. So I wanted to make sure that what I brought to market was clean. So that being all ingredients, the kratom itself, the sweeteners, everything in it, because I felt like this industry people who are looking for me specifically, and I've heard a bunch of people say this since, people who are looking for a non-alcoholic alternative, it's like you're part of the reason you're doing it is because you want to be healthier. So I felt like, okay, you could reach for one of these beverages, and yeah, it's better for you than alcohol, but there's still a bunch of crap ingredients in it. So I wanted to bring a beverage to market that kind of married all those ideas together.
Beautiful and beautiful execution too, because there are a lot of things out there that'll be like, this is the flavor profile. And then you taste it and you're like, maybe like in your dreams it tasted like that, but like that's not the actual experience here. When you're consuming Luminades, these ingredients are it's so great because I was playing with them as both just ready to drink and as mocktails. And the two flavors, one of them being lemonade and then the other one having this like strawberry mint lemonade, we just mixed with exactly that. We just put lemons with the lemon flavor, and we just put muddled strawberries and mint with the other. And it not only did it just amplify the amazing taste, but it was so clear that that's what the actual flavors were meant to be.
Yeah.
So cool. So I'm just curious, what made you think that what made you decide on those two flavors as your first flavors?
So I love, and I used to drink alcohol, and now I don't even remember the last time I touched alcohol, but I would love to get dressed up and go out to eat and order like a really yummy cocktail on the menu, like the bougie cocktail menu. And I live in Naples, so it's like $20 for a nice cocktail. So I loved that. And it always felt so fun to me. So my vision for Luminade was bringing that upscale cocktail vibe to this area specifically. So it's me and my husband behind Luminade. And so we're like, okay, we want to launch with two flavors. So I let him choose one and then my inspiration was the other one. So his was the Luminade lemonade. He wanted just like a traditional lemonade flavor. And he also said, I feel like the strawberry mint lemonade was mine because I love strawberry mint lemonade. But he's like, okay, like that might scare some people off who don't want to experiment with mint or whatever. They feel weird with that. So he's like, let's just do a traditional to make it feel approachable to everyone. So that was the inspiration behind it.
I love that. And what's so hilarious is my husband likes the lemonade and I'm the one that grabs the pink one. So,
It's funny. It's like I will say so 75% of people love the strawberry mint lemonade more. And I agree. I love that one way more. And we've been selling out of that one way quicker. Um, but the people who have said they love the lemonade, it's all men. So I just thought that that was really funny because that's how we create them.
I love that so much. And, going back to the fact that you guys put electrolytes in this beverage, can you explain to those who are listening, what happens if you're not drinking electrolytes with kratom and why that decision was made in this recipe?
So that decision originally came from when we thought this up and then we, split off as far as like the two different flavors. My husband was a golfer in college and he still golfs. And so he would go out. I don't know if you know much about, the a day at the golf course with the boys, but they go out and they drink a bunch of beer. And he's like, okay, by the time you get to the back nine, you're so dehydrated and it's miserable. And like you're drunk and you're tired. And when you get home, you just want to take a nap. So he's like, he started replacing the beer with kratom seltzers. But he's like, he would bring a tumbler and he would take a kratom seltzer and mix it with a Gatorade. And I was doing the same thing at home for a couple of different reasons because I didn't really like the taste of the drinks, not my drinks, but my competitors. And I would mix it with lemonade or, with Gatorade or whatever. And we found out that that really, really helped the dehydrating effects of the kratom. So when we were in our planning phase for Lumenade, we're like, okay, what would be really cool is if we could put this in one, and that would really help Adam on the golf course with feeling dehydrated. And so that's where the idea was born. But then once we started getting more into it, getting through the process more, we're like, why is no one doing this? Like, electrolytes aren't that complicated and they're pretty cheap, to be honest. So I'm like, I didn't understand why that didn't exist. So yeah, which kind of surprised me. And at one point, the formulation took forever. But at one point, I'm like, maybe we should take the electrolytes out. I don't know. And my husband's like, no, that is our super cool selling point. I'm like, no, you're right. You're right. Like maybe it'd make it easier without them. Anyways, obviously we voted to keep them in. And I'm so glad we did because I think my drink's the best. And there's a lot of different upsells to it versus my competition. But that by far has been the number one upsell, especially to people who are familiar with other kratom beverages and the kava industry, altogether. They're like, why has no one done this before?
It's so smart and such a good thing that you're doing because when you think about all of the beverages on the market, not even just kratom, right? Just anything in a can. Sometimes people throw ingredients in there because they're like trendy ingredients or they think that they're helpful, but they're not actually thinking about their consumer, right? So like in my head, like sometimes I drink kratom while I'm like doing computer work, but to be honest with you, for me, it's more of like I'm socializing or I'm doing a physical activity or just like something where I'm like really involved. So it's like not only are the electrolytes helpful for the kratom, but for what else is going on during the
Yeah, absolutely.
consumption. So funnily enough, I'm not sure that's a word,
I
but
think it is.
last night last night my husband and I were watching Idiocracy and they were talking about how,
Oh my
you know,
gosh. I know exactly what you're going to say. I have a funny
yes,
story about that. Keep going.
yes. And so, if you for anyone who hasn't seen it, go see it. It's hilarious. But in the future in 2505, they think that electrolytes are so good that they replace the water fountains. They replace what you water
They
crops
water all
with
the crops with them.
with electrolytes. So obviously, I was talking to a formulation lab and we were talking about how funny it is that they'll just like people who are not in the NA industry or they're not doing this for themselves, they're just doing it because they're jumping on the trends. They're like, let's add all these things. And we're like, but who's your consumer? Like, what are they doing? Is this something that's actually helpful? And that's the coolest thing about the choices I believe that you've made with ingredients because you've really been really thoughtful about what are people doing when they're consuming this? What do they need? I had an old kava tender that I worked with for like a year, and she hasn't drank like kava or kratom in I don't, I think she said like a year and a half at this point. And she said, because she was such a heavy Kratom drinker in the past, but she wasn't very fond of putting electrolyte based like mixers in. And so it caused her to have a very bad chronic dehydration issue. And so when we're talking about like how do you adapt, like how do you turn people into like lifelong consumers or like people who are like really brand loyal to you, you know, you got to take care of them and make sure that you have the right ingredients in them. So when I was watching Idiocracy last night, I was just thinking, I'm like, damn, like, you know, it's so important to get it right and get your like understand where these things go. And I think you just like slam dunked it with this. Like, it's
Thank you.
perfect. Yeah.
I love that. It's funny because a couple of things. So I feel like the term functional beverage is being thrown around a lot in this industry is growing like wildfire, but that term is being thrown around a lot. And I just made an Instagram post about it because when I first came into this industry as a consumer, I'm like, what's a functional beverage? Like brands would say that. And I'm like, what does that even mean? But so I really tried to take that and run with it because ours truly is a functional beverage. It's like, you have the kratom, you have the botanical effects of that, but then in conjunction to that, you have the electrolytes that are in there and they serve a purpose. Like you're saying, you can take one of these drinks and yeah, even if you're just sitting there and relaxing and using it in that way or using it, while you're working, it's still dehydrating you. But beyond that, you take one to the golf course or you take one to a pool day or people take these to the gym because some people use kratom as a pre-workout. It truly is a functional beverage in that way.
Absolutely, it is. Oh, it's so
But with
cool.
Idiocracy, I have to say the story because it's so funny, and I can't remember this guy's name. He's a regular at Alchemist Kava in Naples, and I'll have to ask the owner. I'm friends with her. What his name is, and send him this link because he will laugh. My very first tasting I did with Lumenade. We had just launched like a week prior, and so I'm in there. It was truly the first one I had ever done. I was really nervous, and so I get all set up and people are coming over to the table and I'm giving my spiel and the third one walked away and he's sitting next to me and he turns around and starts laughing and he's like and he had already told he had tried it too and he told me how much he liked it but he turned around and he was like, have you ever seen Idiocracy? And I was like, yeah, yes I have. He's like, so then he starts laughing. He's like, electrolytes, electrolytes. So now every single time I'm giving my spiel to someone, I laugh in my head thinking about the electrolytes. And I always think about that movie. So my husband forced me to watch that movie a couple of months ago. And I thought it was so dumb and funny. It's just like one of those like stupid movies that you laugh at. But yeah, so now every time I give my spiel, that's what I'm thinking. Shout out to the regular at Alchemist.
Hey. Oh man. And that's why it's so important putting the word function in functional. Like it needs to make sense. Like kratom, it makes sense for regardless of your activity because coffee, it's related to the coffee family in general, which means it's a diuretic, which means, yeah, you're definitely, no matter what you're doing, you're going to lose, you know, you're going to lose your hydration drinking this beverage. But the thing is, and what I find to be absolutely beautiful about that is that not only does my thirst feel quenched by time I'm done drinking a Luminade, but because there's not, you know, a crazy amount of sugar, it doesn't, and you use such good sources for your sweetening that I don't feel like I'm a sugar addict. Like I need help sometimes. Like I will go to town on an
No.
entire box of cookies and like cry while I'm eating the last one because I can't stop sometimes. Like but when it comes to these drinks, first off, I don't feel that like crazy sugar addiction kicking in where I'm like, I need another one because of the sugar and it's so tasty. But it really did genuinely encourage me to drink another glass of water and then consume another. And I had zero negative side effects. So, again, when we're talking about function, it's really important to be aware of like, okay, what do I need in my body right now? What do I need in this beverage in order to feel good? And I think Tess is a really great example of that because we'll look at other, beverages on the market and, first off, you can't read what's on their ingredient label. You're not really sure what that is. And then there'll be those proprietary informations where there'll be like, oh, proprietary blend or like natural flavors. And you're like, I don't know what that means. But rest assured, I feel very confident when I'm drinking your drinks that I know what they are, which Brings me to my next kind of question here. When you were developing Luminade, who were you thinking of? Like, what part of the underserved market were you trying to serve?
So that's a fun question because my background's in marketing. And so I knew my first step in creating the brand was identifying my avatar. And my avatar is me and my husband. So that was really fun for me, and it made it not easy, but in developing the brand and the messaging behind the brand, it made that so natural feeling to me because I was just speaking to myself. So yeah, I'm the avatar. It's me and you. And anybody can enjoy these, but to be honest, my very first avatar was millennial women because I really just feel like nobody in this market is specifically talking to them. And in marketing, it's like a famous thing to say niche down. But it's scary to do because you don't want to exclude people. But with me from the very beginning, that's what I've done. And the response has been amazing because when I post or when I tell someone about it and I'm speaking directly to them, they love it. And it's for everyone as long as you're over 21. It's for everyone, but yeah, specifically millennial women.
This is it paints such a story in my head because, people who typically find out about Kratom, there's usually only two ways. Number one, which would be the better option, would be like a kava bar or, a place that serves Kratom on the menu, so you have someone teaching you. Unfortunately, the other place tends to be smoke shops, and I
Mhm.
don't see lots of cute, you know, millennial women
I
walking
go with
into
smoke
smoke
shop.
shops. No one want, I don't even. I send my husband in. Like I don't even go. So, and I'm not, but the thing is like I do genuinely love kratom and I consume it honestly nowadays a little bit more than kava just because I don't need as much kava anymore. But like that being said, it's like, how do you find, like, where do I go to feel like I'm going to consume something safe and consume something that isn't cut with something else? Because that's something that's horrible that tends to happen at smoke shops where they'll say that they're serving you kratom, or not serving, they're selling you kratom in these different varieties. When you have the extracts, of course, it's a little bit easier to be like, okay, well, extract, so I know that they didn't open that in the store. But I've had situations where we'd tried these kratom capsules, and when we opened them up, we noticed that there were multiple colors of powders in there. And it ended up making us feel really terrible. And, ever since then, Tyler and I especially have been really like, what do we do to help make kratom safe and what can we do to help educate people? So, I'm really curious, Tessa, what's your favorite, kind of thing to educate people on when it comes to kratom and, whether that's for shock value or something that they're like, dang, I genuinely didn't know that. This is great.
Yeah, that's a fun question. So I love educating, and that was another vision that I had when I was dreaming up Luminade. Is I'm like, okay, as a consumer, I was a consumer for 2 years in this space before I even thought of Luminade. And I felt so if I would walk into a kava bar, for example, now I feel like it's getting better. But if I would walk in, I was very confused. I'm like, okay, what's a tea? What's an elixir? I felt like people were using words that sounded fun, and they are fun, and it's fun, marketing wise, but then they weren't backing those words up with education on the back end. And so that to me, the message it communicated to me was this isn't for me. I don't understand this. I don't want to drink something that I don't understand. Maybe I should just go back to alcohol. So, you know, and then to your point, then, walking into a convenience store or gas station where I knew that they sold kratom, there was, a brand or two that I would just reach for. There was other brands on the shelf, but I tried to read their can and it was just all very confusing messaging because they were trying to use words like that just didn't make any sense to me. And there wasn't like, this is what it is right here. And this is what, the possible effects are. And I love research. I'm a research based person. And so that's what I kept just trying to find. But yeah, I mean, at kava bars, it's like I'd walk in and kratom, and the kava tender would say, "Oh, do you want, white or green, or what color do you want?" I'm like, I don't know. What do you recommend? And so it was just, again, it just felt very confusing. So that's probably, I love educating on what is kratom, where does it come from, and, breaking that down to, especially to, because I'm trying to speak to the market of people who have never heard of kratom. So it's like, not only then do I need to educate on what is kratom, but then, why the beverage is so functional as it relates to kratom and consuming kratom. So yeah, I think that's probably the most fun for me is, and that's my favorite education piece, is just talking to people who have never heard of kratom before at all and explaining what it is to them in, simple terms, but then also I feel like some people explain it too simply. And it's not just something that's, fun and you can just play around with and you can drink a bunch, because safety is super important to me. And educating people on that is very important. And I think is just a, a part of this industry that could really be improved upon.
It's so true. You know, as someone who is always advocating for kava and kratom, even though I know it's fringy, I know it has hurt some people who, whether they just had bad kratom or didn't have a great dose, or maybe it just genuinely wasn't for their body chemistry. Um, you know, I know that there's a lot of research that still honestly needs to be done in some certain cases in order to give people even more information. But all of that being said, you know, like Kratom has the ability to do so much for so many people. And right now, the American Kratom Association does always put out some really great, like anytime there's research, they're the first ones to put it on the front lines and say, hey, everybody who is consuming Kratom or selling Kratom, this is the information you need to get. They also put some case studies out there to show, hey, this is how you consume it properly. Now, all of that being said, there are some brands out there that, due to the fact that there are marketing restrictions, like if you use the word kratom just straight up on the internet, there are some sites that are going to kind of shadow ban you a little
I
bit,
learned that the
or
hard way. Yes, that is.
mm-hmm. So you might start to see people talking about it. I often use the word speciosa just because it's part of the official name, like of the plant. But other people will call it KT. Um, I've just seen people call it like by the strain, like red tea or white tea, which I think is so dangerous because white tea, the normal kind that we think of where it's just like a green tea, like white tea has, like you could go to sleep on white tea, but like if you had a white kratom, like that's a pre-workout level vibe. Like that is, you're gonna go to town like the Hulk. So point of this whole story is, compared to other botanicals or other functional ingredients out there, yes, there is more to learn, but there's so much to gain. And there's so many positive, impactful stories I've heard with Kratom. Again, assuming that it is being consumed properly. So I'm just imagining the people who are lucky enough to receive Lumenade as their gateway to Kratom. I mean, it's going to help. And I think that that's very key, because the people who are scared honestly for good reason, because the people who are, again, serving, they aren't providing that information. The cans are confusing. Some of them, they can give you seizures with how much, I don't even know, design that's on them. And it turns it into a stressful, like, am I experimenting with crazy things type of a situation. And all of that being said, that's why I love being here with you right now to have these conversations about safe consumption of it. So do you have any recommendations, or do you tell people how many luminades they should have in a day?
Officially, I say no more than one a day. That being said, it really does depend on the person and their tolerance, because kratom has a tolerance just like anything. Responsible consumption is so important. And I've had people come to me and say, "Oh, is this bad for me? Is this bad on my liver? Is it this? Is it that?" And I always tell people, like, do your own research. There's power in the dose. So in one of our cans, there's 45 milligrams of metrogenine. So I found that to be a really good sweet spot for beginners and for seasoned kratom drinkers. But yeah, I just tell people, and some people, like some small women, they're like, I just have half of it and that's great for me. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. And really, it just depends on, body weight and tolerance and a couple of other different things. So generally what I tell people if if somebody buys them from me or I'm handing them a can and I'm like, just drink slowly to assess your tolerance because it truly does depend on the person.
Mm, yes. This message is so important because, you know, not only does it matter per person, but it depends on what season you're in. So, for example, when I was working actively as a kava tender behind the bar, I would consume, I'm trying to do the math in my head right now, 3, 6, 9, like 12 grams of brewed kratom. It's like 4 servings. That's a lot for the short amount of time that I was consuming it in, but I'm running behind a bar that was super busy. Nowadays, I can drink one Lumenade and it'll last me all day, and I'll mix it with some other things here and there because of the way that like kratom is great with it doesn't stay in your body and your system forever, right? Like there are some things that take forever for your body to like really like feel like you've never consumed it before, right? When you have clean ingredients, when you have high quality extracts, it does not take your body nearly as long to sift through. Meanwhile, there are some, for example, kava bars that'll serve kratom. Like they'll just put the leaf crushed up into a powder into the water, and then they won't strain it or anything. And then you're consuming this part of the plant that is a lot more difficult on the liver, and it's a lot more difficult on like it can almost provide like oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like this feeling of like sludginess, right? So, and that's another thing that I wanted to really point out about Luminate is I received zero negative side effects from this. I'm talking no itchies, no irritabilities, no signs of any negative sort of consumption. So I'm super curious, when it comes to finding your kratom source, what was it like for you to be like, oh, this kratom is scary. I don't like this one. And this one, I'm not sure about this. Like, what was the process for you to ensure that you had like the kratom that you were comfortable consuming?
So I have kind of the same story as you. We launched, I think it was March 5th. And so before then, I was consuming a competitor of mine now and getting similar side effects to what you just described. And the second that I fully switched to Luminades, all of that went away. And you know why that is, we don't need to get into on here. But I have my theories. But with all of that being said, the kratom was the most important part to me because truly I made this beverage because I just there was a lot of different reasons, but I wanted to change this industry. I wanted to, make it more approachable, and I wanted to make sure all of the ingredients were trustworthy. So I started in with this. I think I got the idea April of last year. We were in formulation for so long. By I think October, I thought we had finally nailed it. And then I ended up not liking the kratom we were using. And I just uncovered some things about it through the company that we were using, and I didn't like it. So I had to go back to the drawing board. I think we went through 4 different companies before we settled on the one that we did. And in doing that, I mean, I had no experience in this industry, none at all. I was just a consumer. I had no experience in the beverage industry, in the kratom industry, working in it. So I have really had to learn as I go. But yeah, we went through 4 different companies before we settled on the one we did. By the time we settled on that one, and the company that we use, they have been, I think they were one of the first in the game starting in like 2010. And at that point, nobody really knew what this was in the States. So they were really one of the first to markets. But yeah, they're GMP certified, which is, if the listeners don't know, it's a certification process that the American Kratom Association puts companies through. It's really, really rigorous. And there's only a handful of companies in the States that are GMP certified. So again, I wasn't really educated in that before I started Luminate, and I just kind of dived into the deep end on it. And I learned about that certification. And so we were on the third company, and I realized they're not certified. So I'm like, okay. So we had to go back to the drawing board on the formulations because formulation is a science. I mean, you have a food scientist that does it for you, and it's very technical. And so changing, it sounds easy. Oh, just change the kratom. But no, then, you have to go back to the drawing board on the formulation. So we restarted that to get the right kratom in there because I knew, okay, this is right. I like this one. It's lab tested. I knew it was high quality because I had tried it. So yeah, that was the most important thing to me, was making sure that my beverage was safe for people. And even though it costs us a lot more money to do it right. What I've uncovered about this industry in the last year is absolutely wild to me. But yeah, it like I said, it definitely costs more to do it right, but it's so rewarding to hear people like you say those things about Luminade, because we truly, truly want to do it right, and we care about our customers, and we consume them ourselves. And so I didn't want any crap in my drinks. And we're price wise, we're competitive with everyone else. So yeah, I mean, there's really no reason to not try ours.
Yes. I think it's so cool that you took the extra time and didn't just say, hey, I'm trying to get this product as quickly and cheaply to market as possible because it, I mean, it's just another dime in the bucket then. Like it's just another crate. Like it wouldn't stand out on the shelves. And for anyone out there who has a dream of, whether you're just trying to white label a product for your current kava bar or your current non-alc lounge, or maybe you're trying to get into the CPG space, like there there really is like the most important step, and something that Tessa and I talk about all the time, is like ingredients. Like please look for the good ones because again, we're at this point where, when I'm looking around at the market and I'm just trying to put together some mixology guides or help other businesses create menus. A lot of times brands will approach me, or bars will approach me about certain brands, and I'm like, I'm sure your customers like them because I'm sure because at first I liked them too until all of these other things happen, and then you are no longer looked at as a wellness place in any way, shape, or form. And then the whole industry ends up suffering when people start consuming products in a negative way. Um, I'm going to move out of this industry for a second for sake of example. I was looking into what a lot of companies who are making non-alcoholic versions of their normal, whether it's beer or spirits or whatever. And so I was looking into, because I saw that Captain Morgan was coming out with a non-alcoholic rum. So I was like, okay, what have they done anything with it? And I'm just curious, since functional beverages are becoming more of the norm, which again, I love functional, but we don't want to turn into idiocracy here. We want to make sure they're legitimately functional. So I'm looking at their ingredient list, and I can't even pronounce, I don't even, some of these words I've never even seen before. And I worked in a nutritional chemistry lab. Like I was genuinely, like, I know for a fact they definitely put some crazy things in there that are not normal, like ingredients. Like you can't just grow them in the ground. You got to do some processing to get to them. So, if we look at this and we say, hey, is this non-alcoholic option actually going to be better? Like, why not just consume the regular rum if that's the case? Because both seem equally as not helpful.
Mhm.
So pulling that back into this space, because I know again, it is a hot topic where a lot of people want to white label their own in-house products, and they want to there's a lot of people in the entrepreneur space in general who always have anxiety, right? They're always like, I got to be the first to the market or else the market will get too all this, that, and the other. I love that Luminade clearly was like, there's no competition for me right now. My competition is myself making the best possible beverage, to the point where if anyone wants to ask me about any kratom beverage, I can't, nothing else comes to mind because that's how much extra effort she put in. So just wanted to put that out there for anybody who is even thinking about, starting their own canned beverage in any way. This is the way to do it. The way to really look at these ingredients and say, hey, like, is this going to be okay? And is it going to be sustainably okay? Because kava and kratom, since we're kind of just in this whole umbrella here, both of these plants originate, like, some of them come from third world countries, right? So these are completely different standards than, what we have in the States. So to ensure that you're working with a company that is GMP is essential to ensure, like, because you could be doing everything right on your end, but if they're not double checking the COAs on the product that's coming in from whatever country it's coming from, you may end up serving something that's not great.
Yeah, and what really shocked me the most in learning about this industry and getting into the industry myself was it's largely unregulated. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that's scary. And
Scary.
when I got to the end of the process, December, January, February, we launched in March, I was getting to a point where, and I consume Kratom myself every day, where I didn't want to drink a lot of the competitors. And I just really kind of narrowed my choices. And because I figured out who I could, I guess, trust. Um, yeah, it's so I do like to tell people just, my, our beverages are safe. They're, the GMP certified and we have the lab tests and everything like that. But um, my beverages aren't for everyone. Everyone has different tastes. So if you're drinking one that's not a Lumenade, make sure you're doing your research. And you should do your research before you drink Luminades too. I think everybody, has the right to do their own research. And Luminades, they're not for everyone, but make sure before you touch anything in this industry, you're doing research.
So important. And this is honestly a topic that keeps coming up in every single podcast that I've like done in the past month. And I know another one coming up after this episode literally hit me up and was like, can we just do an episode talking on how to regulate this industry? I'm like, yes,
That's so
please.
cool.
Yeah. And honestly, one of my personal goals with a team I've got here in Vegas is we are genuinely trying to um take a very what's the word I want to use? Kind of an aggressive approach. We are literally working on getting in contact with the lawmakers here, and because kratom and kava in general, like that whole fringe business of the alcohol-free lounge itself, there's nothing happening here yet. So there aren't as many, like, really any regulations. So we are trying to be the team that gets in the room with the people and say, hey, like, we are your industry experts. Let's regulate this appropriately. Now, that being said, I'm living in an area both with Nevada and Arizona that it's still new. There's still laws coming out. We're still in the baby phases. But Tessa, you're in Florida. So I'm so curious. I did see,
Mecca.
yeah, Kratom is definitely 21 and up in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw a cool article that was like there were undercover cops that were starting to go into the smoke shops and different places that sell kratom, and they all got denied, which is good because they were undercover trying to, like, and having not the right ID. So that means that people are actually taking this seriously. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, living in Florida, do you feel that the regulations that are there are enough, or do you feel like there needs to be more? What are your thoughts in general?
Well, I support the Kratom Consumer Protection Act in Florida. I think 21 is an appropriate age to consume Kratom. I think it's really interesting because, I mean, as you know, you're an industry expert. Kratom is especially recently has come under fire and it's very controversial. And you have a couple of different camps of people, but some people say it's really bad. Nobody should have it at all. I think it's really like anything. I think you have to consume it responsibly. You have to be an adult about it. Um, and then at some point, lawmakers do have to step in though, and I think I don't think anyone under 21 should have access to it, because you need to be an adult. you have to be an adult in consumption. And people over 21, some of them don't act like adults. Um, but at that point, what more can you do? But yeah, we do support that legislation in Florida. I do think I do think there could be more as far as regulation in the industry, like the business owners. I think that, yeah, I think there shouldn't even be kratom options available to the beverage companies that aren't GMP certified. I truly I think that part of this industry needs a complete overhaul, because right now it's like it's good to be, but it's not, absolutely mandatory. And so I think that needs an overhaul. But as far as protecting consumers, I support that act. And I think, I don't think there's really more that needs to be done. I do think that states all need to be on the same page. And this is a whole, government, we could go down a whole government rabbit hole, but there's like Sarasota County, for example, it's completely banned. And I just think that's kind of confusing for people, because it's like, okay, that's, an hour north of here. And down here in Naples, it's the mecca of Kratom and Kava. So I think that that's a little funky. So I wish that everybody would just get on the same page, but there's just so much education that needs to happen for consumers and for lawmakers. And I know that there is a lot of people like you who are trying to spearhead that. And I think that's amazing. I think that's great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I totally agree when it comes to like having counties be on the same page, because in Arizona, only Maricopa County, only the county that houses Phoenix, is being very particular about, for example, kava being sold. Like you can't sell it in a mocktail anymore. It has to be like in a shot glass on the side, and the consumer can put the shot into the mocktail that you put on the side, but you can't serve it together. Very particular, very, very,
Yeah, they can make it on their own. That's
yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, I understand from the perspective of like trying to, like, someone probably thought, oh, this is protecting the consumer because they have to choose their dose. It's not just like, oh, I'm just yummy, 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 just chugging it down. Like they have to be consciously aware every single time they're about to dose themselves. So I understand from that perspective. However, when I did a whole tour of going to every single kava bar in the past week in Maricopa County, I learned that different health code or like health department people that would come through to do the actual checks, they weren't on the same page. The one that I last got to talk to for like a few hours seemed to be the only person who actually understood what was going on, but all of the other health department workers that would come through, they didn't even know like what kava was. Like, so they didn't even know what to regulate with that. And then another example, I know in Arizona, there was legislation that passed that turned kratom into like put kratom in the food category so that it had to be, there's higher standards for it. And smoke shops aren't technically allowed to sell it in the shady ways that they were prior. Like when I was telling you about that nasty little capsule that had extra garbage in there. But the thing is, are there people going into these places and actually enforcing it? I don't know. And I don't know what triggers the enforcement, if it's always going to be a phone call
Mhm.
or a bad review to the BBB. Like, I don't know. And that's something that I'm trying to figure out more because, yeah, if you have, for example, there's a few kava bars who have multiple locations. Um, and like, for example, if you go up to Flagstaff, which is not in Maricopa County, like they're just doing everything as if it's 2002 in Florida where no one knows anything and we're just vibing.
Wild
Then you
West,
go
Florida is.
Wild West. And then there's other places that have turned it into a beautiful, like, it's more of like it's a non-alcoholic lounge and they just happen to have a kava or a kratom option. And so since it's not the focal point, um, it's almost like the people who come from the health department to go through there, it almost goes under the radar. And I'm watching people,
This is so
um,
dangerous.
so dangerous. And like as someone who's like trying to help make menus for people and like trying to put them together to be in a way that's actually helpful for the consumer to like hey, oh, this is how this menu works. Oh, this is how this is, and this is what I should go look up more. When I've been asked by a couple people before that were like, "Oh, so like what else can I name kratom on my menu so that I don't so that I'm essentially lying to the health department." I'm like, how's
It's a
about let's
double-edged sword because they're not educated in it. So it's people do then the natural consequence of that is then you've got people like that who are like, well, we have to lie and skate this in here so they don't see kratom and get scared. I know I hate it too. I Everybody needs so much education, the consumers, even the business owners, and especially the lawmakers, because you know and this is a problem with everything, but especially with the regulation of kratom. They don't even know about it, and they see one headline that's like kratom is a drug, and then stamp it's banned, it's scheduled, it's whatever. And so yeah, I just again, that's why I think what you guys are trying to do is so great because they need education and people need to know like it doesn't have to be this scary thing. As long as you have the proper education on it and you can, look at some research and you can really do a deep dive into it, it's not so scary.
it's not so scary. Thank you so much, Tessa, for this amazing conversation. I know that this will not be the last because we're just getting started. But that being said, is there any final thing that you wanted us to know about Lumenade?
Oh, wow. Well, go follow us on social media. It's drink_luminade, and I will be doing a really fun announcement soon, but we're going to be coming out with a new flavor on our next canning
Ooh.
run. So I'm going to be it's next week. So I'm going to be doing some formulations, and yeah, we're going to be so then we'll have 3 flavors on our next run, which we're going to be scheduling hopefully here soon because we're selling it out.
Yay! I can't wait. I literally cannot wait. It's ridiculous.
I wish I could bring you with me.
I know.
I,
Just
I
put
met
me in a
Marina.
suitcase.
I met Marina just a month ago on Instagram, and we've become like really good friends since then. So she's a great resource for me and become a great friend.
Oh, thanks, Tessa. You're the best, best ever. And I am so grateful because the last note I want to kind of leave on this episode is, a lot of times when I first entered this industry, it felt very much like it was just like a guys' club full of people who just I don't know if they like thought that they were like drug dealers or something, but there's this like weird vibe about it. And the more and more, we're diving in and the more time goes by and we get to meet and see more badass women coming into this space, it's just nice to have that balance of energy because not only are consumers, both men and women, but also so are the business owners and so are the people who, really can elevate this product to make sure that it stays safe and is delicious and yummy and cute to look at and fun to grab. And instead of just something that's just like some guys club. So thank you
Totally.
for that,
I
Tessa.
did. I learned it was a boys' club, and I've met some like awesome men in this industry. But it's really fun to meet other females and have that feminine touch in this industry.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tessa. We're definitely going to have you back again.
Thank you.
And to anybody out there, if you have any questions or you want to get some Luminade yourself, go ahead and look into the just episode description. I'll make sure there's a link to get an order of Luminade. But also, you can learn some more stuff on the website. Go ahead and follow drink_luminade on social media. And if you have any last questions or anything, please send them over hello@marinamars.com. I will make sure that we get those questions answered. And if you want to talk to Tessa, I'll make sure you're hooked up. So, all that being said, thank you everybody for being here. And if you need anything, just let me know.